So think of your curiosity as a CPU in your mind. CPU is the computer processor. Now that CPU has limited capacity, everything, there are constraints. So now we have to figure out where do we want to deploy that CPU. So just like, Steve Jobs, I have also created processes in my life where pretty much everything is predictable. There is no decision making involved. And the reason for that is that the things that are valuable to me, like I said, these conversations, I deploy my CPU only for that. Not on what I wear, not on what I will eat, not on when will I get up, not on where will I go and run. My entire life is fully programmed.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Luminary Lounge, Insights from Lives Well Lived. I'm your host, Murli, and today we have with us a fascinating leader who embodies the rare combination of analytical brilliance and human connection. Our guest today is Mr. Pankaj Rai, the Group Chief Data and Analytics Officer at the Aditya Birla Group. From his early days in Gorakhpur, Uttar Pradesh, to becoming an alumnus of both the IIT Delhi and IIM Ahmedabad, his journey has been nothing short of remarkable. Through pivotal roles at global giants like GE Capital, Dell, and Wells Fargo, he's been at the forefront of transformative business waves. But what makes Mr. Pankaj truly unique isn't just his corporate success, it's his extraordinary ability to connect with people. He is known as the human LinkedIn, and he's famous for choosing middle seats on flights just to engage in conversations with strangers. An avid marathon runner who turns his runs into opportunities for meaningful dialogues. Today, we'll explore the mind of this leader who believes that success in the digital age that we are going through now isn't just about algorithms and data. It's about understanding the human story behind every number. Welcome to the episode, Mr. Pankaj.
Thank you, Only. Thank you so much for having me here. And it's so nice to be interviewed by a doctor.
Well, it definitely is a rare combination, a doctor interviewing an ex-IIT and IIM alumni. Before we dive into what is definitely a promising conversation for me, what brings you joy these days?
This question has often been asked that, what is your passion? What do you like to do? I think after all, reflection, I figured out the only one thing that gives me joy is engaging in meaningful conversations. So as you know, the moment you said, when can we do it? I said, let's do it tonight.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. That's wonderful to hear. That is what brings joy. And I am providing joy at this moment. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Now, you had this journey where you started off from Gorakhpur and then moved to Delhi. And then, of course, in the premier institutes such as the IIT. And later, the journey which led you to kind of being in this role as the data analytics head for a very big group, the Aditya Birla Group, is just fascinating. Could you just take us back to the moment which actually defined and shaped this path?
I think a large part of who I am is driven by my father. I think parents, we all know, play a big role in who we become and what we are. But the way I describe the impact of my parents on my life is that the hardware was provided by my dad and software by my mom. And what I mean by hardware is that the hard things, should you study engineering or MBA or college and stuff like that. But software really means what are the core values that I stand by. And I think that my mom provided, and which was in a very simple term that just be a good human being. So I think that is the combination of hardware and software who I am. So dad was a person who grew up in a small remote village in UP. And he landed up in IIT Bombay with knowing only one language, Bhojpuri, not even Hindi. So as you can imagine, somewhat like a super 30 kid, He was extremely driven, not just for himself, but for his children. I was the elder one. I had a younger one. I think I got to see a lot more of his experimentation on me, and my younger brother also had some, but I think I got more of it. The younger ones are get it easy because they learn from the elder ones' experiences. Just to give you an example, I was asked to take biology, that just in case I didn't become an engineer, I should be able to become a doctor. My brother was smarter. He didn't take biology, so he took only half the exams. But yeah, I think dad met most of his goals in his life. I think probably all his goals. Two of his goals were to make sure that his two kids go to IIT. So a lot of things that happened to me, I think, were totally driven by my dad. In hindsight, I don't think I had a clue what I wanted to be. And in future, I took up an MBA because I was not very keen to do engineering. I think the decision making, at least in back in the day, was that there were very few choices. If you didn't like one, you probably had just one other choice. So just like I said, if I didn't like biology, the other choice was engineering. If I didn't like engineering, the other choice was MBA. So I think our life in some way was quite simple. That there were few choices. You either didn't get one or didn't like one. You had the other one. You were grateful at least you had one other choice, and you're not stuck with the first one. So that's how my MBA life began. And even my first job was really between two choices. Almost on day 4, when everyone else had been placed in IM, I got two jobs. One was selling light bulbs for Wipro, and the other was a consulting company, Feedback Ventures. And my friends told me that I could not sell light bulbs. So it was easy to go after management consulting. And even after that, most of the life choices in terms of career were driven by some friend telling me that this next job might be good for me. So I think life has just taken its course with no particular idea that I had, except that I need to keep moving forward, trying out new things. What that new thing might show up, I didn't have a clue. But whatever showed up looked interesting. Friends said this will be good for you, and I took it up. So I don't take pretty much any credit for anything that has happened to my life. I think it has just happened on its own. I do think that getting some good college brands on your CV makes life easier for you, because people tend to believe that you must be smart till you sort of prove them wrong. So I think clearly that has worked in my favor so far.
Right. I found this very interesting that you compared hardware and software to parenting. Now, I've heard Clay Christensen, who was one of the teachers in Harvard, mentioning about how uh, processes, resources, and priorities are important when it comes to parenting. So I feel in that context, you can say the hardware was the resources and the processes were the values that you were given. And of course, priorities, as you said, were defined by lack of choices and also friends kind of telling you what to do. Is that right?
Very, very nice analogy. I love it how you brought it all together in Clayton's framework. And I really like Clayton Christensen's idea. So thanks for bringing it in that way.
That is wonderful. Now, moving from different companies, now I see that you've been with GE Capital now, then going on to Dell, and so it's varied. You got in a computer company, and then you got a banking sector like Wells Fargo, and then you come to a manufacturing sector, which is Aditya Birla. Now, was there any method here in this journey, or did you just follow your curiosity, or you felt that this is mainly for the youngsters listening, because as you said, the choices nowadays are just whether we go to Amazon or Swiggy or wherever, we are just bombarded with the choices. So how does somebody decide what they need to do?
Yeah. I think what I have reflected and learned is that our life choice decision making process was what, frankly, my dad did. He said, "What's the trend? What's going to happen?" And there were very few things that were really good, and we made choices based on external trends. But now, if you were to ask anyone, and if I were to ask you, or you were to ask me and say, "What's the trend?" I would say, frankly, there are so many trends, and many new trends can be started because we have seen some things which didn't exist. YouTuber, for example, there was
Yeah.
nothing and someone created a
Yeah.
trend and became a trend. So I think we all know that new trends can also be created. It's no longer limited by what already exists. So I think if you are in that world of abundance, unlike the world of scarcity, I think the decision-making framework ought to focus inward versus outward. Because in the scarcity world, you focused outward because there were these one or two things, and if you didn't catch it, you were gone. But now, if the world outside is abundant, you can't apply that same mental model that I'll figure out a trend, because there is none. And frankly, you can create one. So I think that we have to look inward to say what is it that will give us pleasure, what is it that we will enjoy doing, what is it that we are good at, the whole ikigai model and things like that. So I think reflecting and experimenting are two things that if we do, so we do it in sports. I tried golf, I didn't enjoy it after a while. I tried running, I kept doing it. And all of us in our personal lives have experimented, liked something, didn't like something, whatever we liked, we continued. I think that first principle thinking that we have probably been doing without thinking can be applied intentionally to our careers as well, where we can try a few things, reflect on that and say whether we liked, didn't like, what did we learn for it, try the next iteration based on what we liked and reject the thing that we didn't. So I do think that we can really be what in the software industry is called the agile methodology, where you are kind of launching product with new features. Based on customer feedback, you are evolving it and the product keeps evolving. So if you look at your Amazon website, it's a great example of an agile product which is continuing to evolve based on your feedback. So I think we can look at ourselves as a product. We can continue to evolve ourselves, get feedback, continue to evolve. So I think we can iterate and apply the same product management methodology to evolving ourselves and not have a very specific goal in mind, which was what we used to do in the past. I think allow feedback to take us in the direction that is the right direction for us.
Wonderful points here. I really learned a lot of good things. One is to think in terms of abundance, not in terms of scarcity, because I think we are still stuck with the caveman mentality of thinking about in scarcity, but there is a lot of abundance around us, whether it is, as you said, you know, uh, resources or whether it is people. Now we are connected to so many people, and it's important to know whom we want to connect with. So again, as you said, looking inward and knowing actually what is the purpose of your life, what is important for you becomes more important. And also the fact that you said we have to think like as if we are a startup. We have to experiment, we have to change, and we have to move ahead. So the iterative cycle is what you were mentioning there. Now, coming to leadership, now you've been a leader for probably 2 decades plus now. Now, what is the belief about leadership that you held strongly at the start of your career when you finished your MBA that has completely changed now?
Yeah. So I was in GE, which was a lot about leadership. In fact, GE was also called a leadership factory. In fact, GE leaders were expected to be all-rounders, general managers. They could go anywhere and fix things, and they did till I think till they didn't. So so I think in those days, leadership was a word which I couldn't fully relate to. And you would be shown some big leaders, Jack Welch and others, and lots of books I read. I never resonated a lot with leadership because the idea of leadership was really someone sitting at the top, knowing it all and directing everyone else. So now in hindsight, I can say that it was somewhat authoritarian type of leadership, which was the brand that was there. And I never resonated with that. So for me, whenever someone asked me that question, I said, if we can just lead ourselves, know what we are good at and go in the right direction. And my favorite analogy used to be that when Gandhiji went for the Dandi Yatra, I don't think he waited and said, let me collect a couple of thousand people and then we'll start. He just said, I got to go there and this is my cause and, I'll follow it. And then the right people followed. And therefore, I think it was believing in your cause, believing in yourself and understanding yourself to me is what leadership is all about. And I have to tell you a funny incident. When I said this in one town hall, someone said that, what if you go in that direction and no one follows? Then what do you do? I said, maybe you are following the wrong cause. So again, be iterative, figure out what is meaningful for a lot of people, because if no one is following you, maybe it is just important for you. And, why would you want to do something which is just relevant for you? That's too selfish. You should follow a path which is important for a lot of people. I mean, just like the Indian independence for Gandhiji was a cause. So I do think that if we find a cause which is much bigger than ourselves and follow that, a lot of people will kind of come along. I won't say that we are leading that, but maybe we were the catalyst who brought them along. And I think it's a team sport. Everyone plays a role, just like the Indian independence. I don't think we can give credit to one individual, although one individual may have started something. So I think about some of these things, that the cause, the purpose, the participation, collaboration, some of those characteristics resonate with me.
In fact, in one of our previous episodes, Dr. Rajshekharan, who heads the orthopedic department in Ganga Hospital, had a similar moment with Swami Dayanand Saraswati when they wanted to expand the hospital. And Swamiji had at that point said, if you are actually working for the bigger goal, for the society, for the nation, the universe will be with you. So I think you said more or less the same things, that, if you're looking for a bigger purpose and everybody is aligned with you, then you need to just take the walk and everybody will follow you. But I'm sure in this long journey of being a leader, there have been stories about failure, of taking wrong decisions that changed your approach to leadership. Is there any story that you can tell us that actually was something on those lines?
Again, like I said, to me, now that I have become so aligned to this new idea that I shared with you, that, you know, every failure is just a lesson learned to iterate again. That some of those things don't get interpreted as failures by me, they are interpreted as an experiment. If the experiment works, I'm fine. If it didn't, then yeah, it could be a failure, but it was a lesson learned as well. So, therefore, given that I have had sort of this perspective, not looking at anything as a failure but a learning lesson. It's hard to say one thing, but I do think that if I were to look really back and now forward, I think it was a lot about myself initially when I used to think. This idea that, I need to follow something which is much broader than me probably came much later. It's hard for me to put a finger in it because a lot of things that I'm sharing with you are all reflections. They were not intentions originally, they are more reflections looking back. So I can't put a finger on it, but I think somewhere along the line I realized that life is not about myself. It has to be about a cause. So over time, I think the cause or the purpose has become much bigger than the people, including myself or anyone else, and that is what I have believed in. So I don't think I can remember any specific story, but I do think that there were causes of confusion and frustration in the past, but they were driven primarily because I was thinking about it for myself. I don't think at that point in time I was thinking about a cause. Because whenever I started thinking about a cause, every failure was an opportunity to learn, try something new, get up and try again.
Yeah. But how does a youngster have this mindset? A failure actually can set somebody back. It can actually even ruin careers. So how does somebody develop this mindset? Is there any tip?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there is, at least in our field, what used to happen is that, people would focus on projects. So, you are a project manager, this is your purpose, right? And then later on, and I was a project person also, then people started making products, these software products. So products are supposed to be far more versatile, much more flexible. They can meet a very different set of needs. I think now, and this is to me, again, like a Maslow's hierarchy, project at the bottom, product, and then the top is really purpose. So the purpose was always there in the past, but I think we spoke about projects and products. I think in this VUCA world, which is so changing so rapidly, today the only thing which can remain constant for a long period of time will be purpose. Your products and projects will have to keep evolving, keep experimenting, and so forth. So I think if people can realize that, I'm going after this purpose, this cause, like in your case, let's say you are someone who wants to, eradicate a particular disease.
To
That's
ensure
a,
safety,
that's
for example, as an
safety.
anesthetist, that is one of the
Yeah,
main things. Yeah.
actually
So working
safety.
for safety.
Now,
Yeah.
safety is the purpose. Now you can bring a project, you can bring a product, but all of those are means to an end. I think many a times we think about that project as the end in itself or a product as an end in itself and don't think beyond. So I'm starting to tell people that think of these three P's, because you have to do some projects to do something. You may be bringing a product to do something, but the purpose is really what you are really focused on. So don't get bogged down by the intermediate steps, which can change. Because if you don't have that purpose, a failure of a project or a product can give you grief and you have nothing to hang on to. So I think the best thing to hang on to is a purpose. And I think if people can start to develop that mentality, and it could be being physically fit. It doesn't mean that I have to run marathons. It could be other ways to being fit. Because if I think of me as a marathon runner, as an entity which can go away at some point in time, then I'll feel frustrated. But being physically fit cannot go away. Whatever is the context, I will do whatever it takes to be fit. So I do think that if we develop that mentality that the real purpose of the cause is what we are after, everything else is a means to an end, I think we will have less reasons to be disappointed, because those causes tend to not get met, or can get met in many different ways, and we don't get attached to the way we are meeting those objectives.
It's excellent. In fact, it brings me back to what is there in the scriptures about Lakshyartham. So you need to understand the why behind what you're doing, and the purpose actually drives you forward rather than, as you said, the smaller goals on the way. But as a leader, I'm sure, you do have nights when your sleep is disturbed with something. Is there anything as a leader that keeps you awake at night, especially with so much of advances happening every day?
Well, I think the only thing that I think would trouble me is the character, the values, and the softer aspect. The harder aspect, like I said, they are here. They are not. They are ephemeral. They will keep changing. But I think if I find that someone around me in my team or elsewhere doesn't have the right intent, doesn't have the right character, doesn't have the right attitude of collaboration and taking people along, I think that is what disturbs me. So I'm all about creating a trust-based environment, creating a purpose-based team, and so on and so forth. And I do think that these are not altruistic ideas that we should do it because we are nice people or they are moral things to do. To me, I really feel that that is the only way we can take the world forward in a positive direction. I don't think there is any other way. So while some people think that doing good or being socially responsible are higher moral values, I think they are actually just really practical ways to sustain our planet and our own selves. So that's what I truly believe in. So therefore, the trouble will only be on those softer aspects of intent, purpose, why, so on and so forth. Not so much about some of the other tactics which can be changed.
You're very famous for your 5 C's framework now, as you said about integrity, about people. Now, I've come across your YouTube talks about the 5C framework, which stands for curiosity, compassion, conviction, creativity, and communication. Now, I was intrigued by how you even developed this. Can you talk to us and tell us the evolution of this 5C framework
Yeah,
and what
and
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 what
I
it stands for in your
yeah,
in your life?
and you have done a lot of research on what I stand for. So this framework came about 7, 8 years ago when my older daughter was going to college, and she had chosen economics, maths, and statistics in Christ College. And my wife, who has seen me doing all these podcasts and Gyan sessions, told me that you keep giving Gyan to everyone else. Now you have a daughter going to college. You better give her some advice on what courses she should choose and so forth. So now, when asked at home by the home ministry, the answer can't be frivolous. I can tell you today anything, and you won't come after me. But this is where I had to do a lot of thinking. So I said, let me think about it and come back to you, because I don't have an easy answer, because this answer will stay on forever in my life. So it was a very critical one. So I said, what can I do? What can I tell Pragya, my daughter? And I felt that telling her what subjects to choose or things like that will not be a good thing, because frankly, it's hard for me to say, unlike my father, that what subjects to choose. So maybe I can tell her things that I have learned or observed, and things that she can sort of keep with her. And they would probably be more in terms of broader trends rather than specific things, because sometimes it's easier to look at trends rather than say what you have to do now. So I said, what are the trends that I have observed in my own life? How do I project those trends going forward? I was telling you about scarcity, abundance, and many of those things. So that was the inspiration, that let me look at some of these trends, reflect on that, look at what's going to happen. And then I said, whatever these trends are telling me, things that will be in short supply and high demand should be good to acquire. I mean, it's like the whole economic principle, and she was going to study economics, that, things that are going to be in short supply and high demand, you should acquire it, because then you're a bit unique compared to the others, and hopefully, therefore, you will be more valued than the others. So it came from that perspective that I set out to determine a framework or an equation based on my own life experiences for that. So the first trend that I observed was this whole globalization. I was a product of globalization. I graduated from college in 91, which is when I think Manmohan Singh
Well,
liberalized our economy. Yeah, yeah. And we all saw the benefits. I mean, you have been part of that as well, that benefits of globalization. Our country grew well, China did well, everyone in the world did well. So I think globalization created a lot of extra value. But I think what it did was, while it created high GDP growth, I think it created a lot of inequality. We had lots of billionaire, we had lots of trillion-dollar companies. At the same time, we had lots of layoffs, we had lots of people living under $2 a day and things like that. So I think that whole inequality, and there is a measure, and the Gini coefficient also says that that is what happened. So I started to think, that was back in the day, and now it might appear that it's already playing out, that future will belong to deglobalization. Because people will say, you know what, all of this globalization hasn't really helped me. So why do I need it? And therefore people will look inwards, and countries will look inward, and everyone will say, I don't care about everyone else. Let me just care about myself, because when we globalized, frankly, nothing trickled down to me. And therefore, deglobalization will be a future trend. But when I looked around, and again, like I say, this was 8 years ago, I said, but what does the world really need? This is what I think the people will start to do, but what is really needed? Because that's the supply and demand. The supply side is look inward. What's the demand? So I said, what are the big requirements of the world? So I said, big problems are global warming, terrorism, so on and so forth. And we all know that none of these problems are local. They're all global. They can only be solved through collaboration and cooperation and so on and so forth. Look at the private sector successes as well, Amazon or any of these companies, and we all say they are ecosystems, they are platforms, which basically again talks about collaboration and participation of a lot of people. So I said the world seems to need collaboration, participation, and all of that, and everyone is looking inward. There looks to be a gap between supply and demand. So I said the first C, which is going to be in short supply and high demand, will be compassion. And to me, compassion was from two different lenses. One was that, you're a nice guy, you should be compassionate, you should care about others. But I also looked at it from a pure, in my opinion, a very capitalistic lens, that this is the supply-demand situation in the world. And even if you are a very hardcore capitalist and you apply, data and say, looks like this compassion is a cool thing, let me acquire it. So I said, the first C is compassion. I'm sure someone who is more compassionate, which means they're not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about a lot, many more people, a lot long term. So net, your optimization equation has many more variables, and many of them are also long-term in nature. So you're thinking much beyond yourself. That was the idea of compassion.
I have a question here. Now,
Yeah,
when you say compassion, are you looking at one spatial and temporal relation? Because compassion can be for people around you and for a future generation as well.
yeah.
So are you thinking of compassion in these terms?
Both. In fact, I used to give one other example to support that assertion. So again, long ago, when I had on some topic asked my dad about something, and he had said this statement that, whenever you are in doubt, just look at nature. They have all the answers because it has survived for 15 billion years. So I would say that if I look at nature in the solar system, it seems to be expanding. So if we have to just stay still, we need to also expand. And I used to jokingly say that not our girth, but our thought process. And the thought process has to be in both those dimensions, geographical and temporal, because if the universe and the solar system is expanding in a very rapid pace, it should be our nature to also continue to expand our horizon and thought process in that sense. So I would say that was the thought process behind the compassion C.
Okay. And now we'll move on to the other C's.
Yeah. So the second C was really driven by we spoke about the scarcity and abundant mindset. So like I said, I reflected back and said, what did we have? Colgate and Forens, Ambassador and Fiat, Lambretta and Vespa. We pretty much had two choices. I think in the watches category, I couldn't even remember anyone apart
HMT,
from
HMT.
Yeah, there was
Yeah,
probably the
that's it.
second. Right.
And probably a Casio or a Seiko if you're lucky to have somebody
Yeah.
coming in from Singapore.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I said at that point in time, trend spotting was a good way to figure out, what to do, because, whatever is the trend is all you can do. There aren't too many choices. But given when there is abundance, you better look inward and be a trend setter. So instead of being a trend spotter looking outward, you can be a trend setter looking inward. And that trend setter to me was really conviction, meaning what is it that you believe in, where can you play? And my thought process also was that if you are really compassionate and you have a broad view of the world, maybe that will give you some clue to where is it that you want to play, or at least you can experiment and figure out what your conviction is and what your purpose is. So that's how the second C of conviction, your place in the sun, came about. I think the third C came from the idea of linearity of the world that I was used to. I was in G Capital. I was called a Six Sigma person. Six Sigma was all about process improvement. So if you just improved something, you got ahead, and surely we did. So in those days, Toyota Motor Company was a pioneer of Six Sigma. They would say, daily morning we do huddles and we improved a bit, and we have beaten Ford and General Motors just because we are improving small measures. So I said, that's a good idea. But then I felt that when Tesla came along, they were also left standard. So I felt that with so many technologies and so many changes happening, we can't think of life in a linear fashion. And therefore, the third C was creativity, which is you have to think of it in a multidimensional way. and you can't just think linearly. So that's how these three C's came about. In fact, I saw some order in it. Like I said, that curiosity leading to compassion, leading up to your own conviction,
Connection and
and that conviction also leading to some amount of creativity. Because if you are convinced and you're in the flow, hopefully you will also be creative because you are dedicated to the cause. So I thought of these three C's in that order, one leading to the other, and therefore this 3C framework was born. But again, a couple of years later, I kind of quizzed my daughter, does she remember it? And she said she's forgotten. So I said, like a good product manager, I need to improve this 3C product and make it a more meaningful one so that the customer remembers it and uses it. So the other two C's that got added was, I said, let's start with curiosity. Because if there's no curiosity, where will compassion come from? Where will anything come from? But when you have compassion and you have this whole, conviction and creativity, you got to also communicate. You have to talk about it, or if you are something, you launch your product and you communicate it out. And when you communicate it out, you get feedback. And when you get feedback, you become curious back again. So to me, it now became a circular 5C framework. I mean, Jeff Bezos uses this term flywheel, the Amazonian flywheel, which moves faster. So to me, this 5C was that proverbial Amazonian flywheel to say, you are curious, becoming compassionate, that is leading to your own conviction, to your own creativity, your communication, and back to curiosity. So these 5 C's to me sort of completed the circle. And when I look back, somewhere I also felt that maybe I was just creating a framework of something that I was probably doing it anyway. See, many a times what we are, and we try to find that answer as well. Because someone asked me that, what do you think, where do you stand on these 5? And I said, yeah, I never thought about that. I was just so busy creating frameworks. And I said, and then I asked that other person. In fact, he only told me, he said, actually, you know what? You're just projecting what you're already doing. I said, I didn't think of it. Because he said, whenever I see you, you're always asking questions and you're so curious and, you're genuinely compassionate and all of those things. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It's for others to judge. But maybe that 5C was a reflection of what I was doing already. And I found some nice logic to derive that framework from first principles.
I love the engineering mind behind this. Mo Godot also came out with the happiness equation, and you have come out with 2, 3 equations for living a life. And this 5C framework is probably the engineering mind, always trying to make formulas out of something which is around you. Now, compassion, conviction, and creativity. Now, a lot of CEOs across the world, a lot of very successful people are into meditation, are into mindfulness. Do you think this can have an impact on at least these 3 initial core principles of the 5C framework, which is compassion, conviction, because you'll get to know who you are, and of course also can make you creative. What is your take on this?
Yeah. So many a times, a lot of my father, my brother, many of my friends go for Vipassana and many other types of meditation, and they all encourage me to come along. And somehow, I don't know, I never felt like doing it. And a couple of times I was reflecting on why, that's happening. So I really don't know, but the way I kind of share this with people, not trying to be immodest, is to say, can we do things first time right? This is something, again, engineering mind taught in Six Sigma. Do it first time right. Don't even create a defect. Create a mistake-proof product. Those are the types of ideas. So my thinking was, can we have a sort of a ideal life which doesn't have defect, so we don't have to go and kind of go fix it? Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. It's almost like having an ideal lifestyle in terms of food and this, that, and the other, that, you don't have any disease and you don't have to go for medicine. Now, if you think that Vipassana is the medicine of the mind, just like allopathic medicine is medicine for the body, I would feel that, can I design a life where I frankly don't need any kinds of medicine? I just am in the flow. Now, hard to say whether anyone can do that, but I think it can be an aspiration to say, can you not, like I said, use these 5 C's in a way to not have any defect, not have any waste, not have any trouble, for you to just be mindful all the time versus go one time and do a 10-day meditation. But like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. I think we don't choose our context. We don't choose our destiny. And like I said, lots of my friends, my parents and others do Vipassana, and maybe there's a need for them in their context to do that. It's just that I have not found a need to do that. And therefore, I would kind of argue that it is possible to not have it as well. So I would not assume that everyone should do it, is what at this point in time, I think.
I mean, a very, very wonderful word out there was flow, staying in the flow. And I think the power of now and being in the now is probably something that you have as a gift. And that's why probably you don't require meditation. Now, out of all these 5 C's, which is the most challenging to maintain under pressure? Now, you've been through, I'm sure, definitely a lot of tough situations, but out of these 5 C's, which one would be the most difficult? And that is something that people who would want to follow this framework would want to train more in that aspect.
So first of all, I always tell people that these frameworks were created post facto and they were not the intentional, and I didn't follow it. I'm just kind of explaining what I think I do or others can do. So that's one. Secondly, I've often been asked that how do you make people curious? Because like I always said that C is the first C. And that is something, frankly, I haven't got a good answer of, because I find a lot of people are very curious. And then there are a lot of others who are very happy to say, please tell me what needs to be done, I'll do it. Versus, trying to figure it out there. So I have to say that right now I have a project to understand curiosity better, because this is a question I have often been asked when I have talked about 5C. So I would argue that I think the curiosity part is the hardest part. We also see sometime that in stress, people say, don't bother experimenting. I know this has been done in the past. Let's just do it. Don't be too curious. So I would think that curiosity probably goes out of the way many a times, and many a time doesn't even exist. And at least I don't have a formula to create it out of thin air, although I'm looking for it. Because if I have given a framework, I better be able to also give some ideas on how to generate curiosity. Some of my friends have recently given me a couple of books on curiosity, so maybe I will read them and get some ideas. But I have to say that's the one I'm still searching for. And Murli, if you ever get any idea, just call me, WhatsApp me, send me a voice note. I would love any ideas from anyone.
So it's a very important thing. In fact, decision making, on the contrary, has, people have been made to think that curiosity should be out. Like example, Steve Jobs wearing the same, dress for every Apple launch. I'm sure he was not curious to go shopping to, buy colorful dresses, but people said, no, this should be the decision making. You should not have decision fatigue. So have minimum number of choices through the day. And if we start implementing that, then of course we are weeding out curiosity. Now, isn't that a conflict when it comes to, say, a decision-making process, as you said about curiosity? How do we kind of weave this curiosity into a decision-making process?
So think of your curiosity as a CPU in your mind. CPU is the computer processor. Now that CPU has limited capacity, everything, there are constraints. So now we have to figure out where do we want to deploy that CPU. So just like, Steve Jobs, I have also created processes in my life where pretty much everything is predictable. There is no decision making involved. And the reason for that is that the things that are valuable to me, like I said, these conversations, I deploy my CPU only for that. Not on what I wear, not on what I will eat, not on when will I get up, not on where will I go and run. My entire life is fully programmed. Exceptions can happen, but if there is no exception, I know when I will sleep, when will I get up, what will I eat for my breakfast, when will I go to office, what will I do, so that many of those things which don't need any disturbance. And I also think that certain things done with discipline is not bad either. So to me, I would deploy my curiosity or the CPU to things that I truly value, and otherwise live in a purely JOMO mode, which is joy of missing out. So I have no clue what's happening in cricket or politics or, anything like that, because I don't watch TV. I don't have any newspaper. I have no clue what's happening next to my house. Because my view is that, again, going back to the scarcity and abundance framework, I think we were programmed, or our mental model was trained based on past data to say that we are in a scarce world. So if you get something, just keep it. So when we went for food, we would just eat a lot because we don't know when the next food will be available. When we found information, we again got all of it. We'll say, let's just gobble it. Even if there's a black and white Chitrahar, let's just watch it because we don't know when we'll get the next time. So I think our mental model in the scarcity world was trained to grab things and store it because we didn't know when we will get it next. Now, just imagine now the new data set is really the abundance. Now, if you apply the same mental model of grabbing both food and information, you will have obesity and mental illness, which I think is what the society is facing. So I think, therefore, the mental model that we need now is of not having anything as a default and seeking it out when we need it. So for me, If I need food, I'll go get it in the fridge, order on Swiggy or whatever, but most likely I should not need so much of it. If I need information, I can go to ChatGPT or Google or my friends or on WhatsApp and search for it. But 90% of the time, I don't need it. So I think if we can probably go from a FOMO mode to a JOMO mode, I think FOMO was a useful mode in the past when there was few things and, good to have whatever is there. But today, I would think that JOMO should be the default, joy of missing out. Just focus on things that are really valuable. All others are out there. Get it. You can get it whenever you want it. Don't waste too much time day to day on those things is what I would say.
Excellent. I loved all the messages. One is forming habits, not thinking too much about what you need to do on an everyday basis, and loved the JOMO. When the world is actually in FOMO mode, you have actually triggered a very, very good conversation here about JOMO and abundance, thinking in abundance, knowing again, going inward. Wonderful points there. Now, moving ahead, I just want to kind of pick your brains a little bit on the tech aspects. We are seeing AI, in all fields, and it is something which is being talked about from careers to rocket launches. Now, how do you see this intersection between, say, traditional manufacturing, which you are in, and AI? And one of the fears that people have is job losses, a lot of things taken over by AI. So what are your thoughts about this as a leader?
So many a time, and you have heard it many times, it's there in the popular media that people say that, these jobs will be replaced or these jobs will be lost. Now, if you just look at first principles, you talk to people and they will say, you know what, I don't like to do repetitive jobs. They're too boring. I'm a creative person. Please give me a creative job. I'm sure in any field that you are in, you will find that notion. Now, if you believe that that is true and people really believe in it, I think if you look around, AI and some of these things are largely replacing jobs which can be well defined, which you can call sort of repetitive. And there is a creative element of it, and I'll talk about that. But in general, a lot of repetitive tasks are getting eliminated. So I would say that if people were true to their belief that we want to be creative, I mean, they should utilize this opportunity to say, the basic part of my job, which is repetitive, is become simple. I have freed up time. Let me use it for creative pursuits. So I do think that this is an opportunity for all of us to expand our mind and give space to the creativity. Now, I would also say that a lot of people have become so programmed to do repetitive jobs that while they may say that they want to do creative job, maybe they need to be unprogrammed or unlearn some of those old things. Because we have seen, this is nothing new, we have seen it in manufacturing. There were enough people doing manual labor. And when the CNC machines came in, they didn't need that type of skill. They required a different type of skill. Maybe they required an ITI engineers and not an unskilled guy. The same person could operate, machine which would be doing jobs of 20 people. Similarly, any technology which came in the past has replaced the previous skill, has reduced jobs. So I think there is an element of that we should be cognizant of and embrace and take advantage for it. I mean, in the COVID times, all of us took up. I mean, we had this iRobot which was cleaning our house. It's not as if when our house help returned, her job was gone. Now she was asked to do a literally higher order job that she was cleaning the ceiling and other things which the iRobot could not climb and do. So she was doing stuff that fellow could not do. So I do think
she had to get creative, and she had to get creative at that point. I would say.
Yes, yeah. So I do think that if we are creative and we think about what else can we do in pursuit of the purpose and not look at our identity as the task that we were doing. See, many a time what we don't realize it, the task becomes our identity. If we can zoom out and make the purpose our identity. I mean, you as a doctor can say, oh, now there is a robo which can do my job. So have you gone? No. You can do more such jobs. You can be more creative. You can try out new things. So I do think that if everyone was to dealing their identity from the task that they have been doing for a long while and say, this task was being done for a certain purpose, that purpose is much bigger than this task. And in fact, I should welcome automation of this task so that I can get some creative time to try out new things and experiment more. I think if we all can develop that mindset, which was not required in the past, so it will require some development, I think the world will be very exciting because every automation will be welcomed and say, now I have more time. What else can I do? What else can I experiment with? So I do think that there is an opportunity for a lot of people to rewire themselves, reimagine the way we think about automation to say, this is going to, allow us some extra time And how do we want to use that extra time should be the question to ask versus to say, what if my tasks get automated? What do I do? Half full versus half empty.
Thanks for the insights. We all know again that AI feeds on data, and you are at the forefront of that technology that is heading a very big group on data and analytics. How do you balance data-driven decisions with, say, intuition and experience? Data is telling you something, but your gut feeling is to do something else. So how does somebody kind of navigate this problem?
Right. And many people have said that, and you have heard about artificial intelligence and artificial narrow intelligence and general intelligence, so on and so forth. Many people will also believe that human beings are also just sort of a machine which can be programmed, created, improved upon, and so on and so forth. So I think when people say gut feel, really that gut feel is also data, but the model is not known. Because I think that
Okay.
gut feel also developed over time in our DNA, experiences of our forefathers, experience of our own. It's just that we are unable to explain that. In
Yeah.
fact, in the field of artificial intelligence, there are a lot of models which don't, which just are not explainable. So in fact, explainable AI is becoming a very new emerging field because they are able to figure out patterns and tell you what to do, but they don't know why you need to do it. So many a times, I think gut feel is exactly that, that you have figured out a pattern and you know this is the right thing to do, but you can't explain it. So therefore, I would argue that just because you can't explain it doesn't mean that it was not backed by data. Now, it may have its own errors and this, that, and the other. So therefore, I do think that gut feel has a very, very critical role to play, and we should certainly not ignore it. And most people will argue that despite all the data, your gut feel does have a role to play in decision making. So I don't think anyone can automate decision making. Eventually, the human has to intervene, and when the human does intervene, they will bring an element of gut feel. And I think it's desirable because it will add some value, which probably the data may not have been able to do, and this human being probably had and did not know how to explain it. So that's how I think about this whole gut feel piece. I think it has to be valued and nurtured and not to be done away with, because many a time people say, oh, I'll automate everything and I didn't need a human being. I think I would not think that's a good way to think about it.
In fact, rightly mentioned, brain is probably the biggest black box out there because we don't know how it works. And as you mentioned, it probably is doing a lot of calculations, a lot of algorithms, and emotions probably are the output of these algorithms. So that's a very nice take on how to kind of trust the intuition. Now we will move on to something light. We have been discussing very, difficult, I would say, AI and data related stuff. Now, is it true that the first marathon that you ran, you were dressed as a sadhu?
Yeah, so what happened was that I had moved to Bangalore back in 2005, and I had kind of started running long distances in Singapore where I was, because in Delhi, when I lived there, no one ran. We did run behind buses or we did run behind other things, but no, running was not something which was very well known, not long distance running. We thought running used to be 100 meter, 200 meter, and all of that. But in Singapore, I met some people who would do long distance, so I had done a bit of running there. So when I came here, I met some old friends, and they said, "Oh, we have a running club, Runners for Life. Let's all join. We'll go." So once in a while on Sundays, we'll go there. Then they announced the marathon here, and it was called the Lipton International Marathon. And the reason I remember it because I was in Dell, and Dell was also a sponsor. So I said, good, we should take part in this marathon. And some friends of mine, one of them specifically, a gentleman by the name Arun Pai, very well known for his Bangalore walks, he said, I used to live abroad, and people would dress up in fancy dress to run marathon. I said, wow. And some of us locals had not heard that. So he said, okay, whatever you say, Arun, you are the imported guy. So what should we do? He said, you know what? I'll go to this shop. I'll get some costumes, and there were 6, 7 of us, and you guys will have to wear it, and we'll run as sadhus. So that was his idea. So he went to a shop which used to sell costumes for Malgudi days, and 7 of us dressed up as proper sadhus with white beard and white hair, and that mustard color shawl. So the only thing which was visible was our shoes. Everything else was like a sadhu. So 6, 7 of us ran the full marathon. One of them, a guy called Hari, could not do it. He, after half marathon, he left out, but all of the others completed it one way or the other. So the first marathon really was with not much preparation and somehow limping back and finishing it. But we were the most photographed people. I don't think people remember who won that marathon, but everyone remembered that there were these 6, 7 sadhus who ran. So yeah, inadvertently we became very famous. And then Once you've done it once and you said, now we have to run only marathon, how can we run a half when we have done a full? So that's the beginning of my marathon journey. So if a sari run or a sadhu run or any other form of entertainment added to the run makes it enjoyable, I think we should welcome it, because it is very stressful otherwise for a lot of people. So why not make it fun?
And how has running influenced you in other areas of life? Just as an example to, many people out there who probably haven't taken to exercise, has it made a difference?
So, again, there's a framework for physical fitness also. Like I had this framework about these 5 C's,
Yeah.
and that framework is S triple E, and I've just added an F also, and I'll tell all these 5 variables now. So S is sleeping, then eating, exercising, and expression, and the F that I have added is financial planning. Because someone told me that, you're talking about all of these things, but today, unless you do well financial planning, that's also an element of wellness. So I had not thought of that when I originally thought of this SEEE framework. So now I think it's a SEEE and an F. So for me, 8 hours of sleep is what I figured out was good for me. Eating less. In fact, I would say that I probably have, on an average, 2 meals a day. Although I have it 3 times, but I try to eat less. So effectively, have 2 meals a day. Exercising, I have this routine, and I'm into badminton and cycling as well. So some exercise routine. And expression, like I said, my expression part is to say, what are your thought process? And my thought process is to have a bigger purpose than yourself, is how I think about that. And anyone can determine that. And financial planning to be prudent, be aware of ups and downs in life, and be sort of conscious and conservative in your financial plan, think about the future, so on and so forth. So those are the SEEF sort of variables in my overall well-being. But this whole exercise and marathon that you specifically asked came to me just out of the blue. I enjoyed running, but like I said, it was a way to meet people and talk to them. So our group is known for what we call Runversations. So we talk all the time. So we had a recent marathon in Bangalore. There were 2 others, and we said, entire 4 hours we were all talking. In fact, one of those actually came back and wrote a long blog on LinkedIn. I mean, he had the time and the enthusiasm to remember what we spoke. He summarized it and wrote about it. So I think that this is for me another opportunity, not just about physical fitness. It's more about seeking new knowledge, making new friends. Most of the people in our running group were actually found running alone, and as they say, trespassers are recruited. So we had recruited them, and they're all part of the group. So I think it's a very fun group, very diverse, all interested in talking, not having any airs about anything. And there's nothing else that unites us about but talking to each other, having breakfast, and helping each other.
Now, how do you talk when you run?
So, in fact, I used to ask the other question, that how do you run quietly? So many a time when people ask me question next, I said, actually, you have to explain the other part of it. How do you do the other side? Because I used to get bored when I was running alone, and I was very animated when I was talking to someone and I'd forget the distance. So I have found a lot of people who, when they talk and run, they forget how much they have run and they enjoy it. And later on, someone also provided a medical reason, and they said, if you can talk while you run, you are probably not stretching yourself too hard and it's good for you. So I found a new justification for the conversation to say, this is good for health, we should do it, and promoting this even more than before.
Any great ideas that have come out when you're talking and running?
I think all great ideas have come only on my running. So all the frameworks, a lot of ideas that I take back to office. So let's say I have a issue or a topic that I have to think about in office. It goes to my run. It gets discussed. Some ideas can run. So to me, some of these, opportunities are great to get ideas from people who have no clue on what you do and get diverse ideas. So yeah, it's an entire continuum of office and run and home and friends. They're all interconnected the way I see it.
Wow, excellent. This is an excellent example of why being connected in this world is so helpful and how it can actually enrich somebody's life. Amazing. I did get this trivia while I was looking at various things, that you were born on the day that when man first stepped on the moon. Now I'll leave it to our, viewers and listeners to guess the day. But is that the reason why you get these energy levels to maintain such diverse responsibilities and also engage in so many activities?
Many a times I'm asked this question that, how are you so enthusiastic, or how are you so energetic and all of that. And frankly, I really don't know. But the guess that I have is that if you are enjoying what you're doing, you will have high energy levels. And I would ask people that maybe remember a time when you were young and you went out to play cricket or football or kabaddi or gilli danda or kancha or whatever, and you forgot how much time there was. And when you
Yeah.
came back, you were actually not tired. You were really energetic. So my
The
guess is, I mean,
only alarm clock could be, the stomach telling that you need to eat something.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do think that what you mentioned also, the flow state, which is to say when you are totally engrossed and enjoy what you're doing, I think you derive energy rather than lose energy. So at the end of my Runversation, I'm actually more energetic than before. So I do think, and I don't know the medical backing to that, but I do think that when you do things which you really enjoy, I think it generates energy rather than consume energy in some way.
The medical explanation I couldn't give is dopamine, serotonin, and the
Maybe.
endorphins. So you're running, you're getting endorphins, you're engaging in good conversations, you're getting your dopamine and serotonin. So probably your blood levels of dopamine and serotonin are normally running a little on the upper limit of the normal. So probably that's the reason. Coming to building authentic connections with people, we see people network, right, when they go to meetings, and but you are a person who believes more in friendships rather than network, as I can gather, and you're called the human LinkedIn. Now, can you tell us a little bit about this as to how you build authentic connections, and not only with one or two, but at scale? You probably disproved Dunbar number of 150. You probably have 200 or 300 very close friends. So, how does somebody develop good relationships?
Yeah. So I have to always remind everyone that all my frameworks, all my ideas are all post facto superimposition on what I have observed. And they may or may not be the way anyone else can do it because I have done it just organically. I wasn't even thinking about it. I still remember once upon a time someone gave me a book. It was called The Tipping Point. And he said, do you know this book? I said, no. He said, do you know why I've given it to you? I said, no. He said, there's this particular character in this. I think it was called The Connector or something like that. You remind me of that, and therefore you go read it. Now, I never ended up reading it. But what I'm saying is that many a times I have done things organically, but other people have found some other meaning or some this thing and told
Yeah,
me that
yeah.
this is how it happened. And maybe that is the reason it may have happened. So on the topic of networking, I'm often asked to guide people on networking, right? And why do I do it? So I think the only thing that I would probably reflect and say that I've just been curious. And people from my school, college days will tell me that you're almost like meeting a new person and always interviewing them. For what reason, we never knew. So maybe it was just innate in me. Maybe I was just curious, wanting to know every little detail of the individual next to me for no particular reason. But over time, as the database grew, I started to see patterns and connection, and I'll say, oh, so you are interested in that. I know so and so who could help you. So I would start making the connection just logically. If I meet you and you say I'm interested in that, I said, oh, so and so. And after that, I said, oh, when they met, they came back and thanked me. Oh, great, you. So somehow, I think some of these positive reinforcement would have inadvertently made me do more of that. And over time, once there was too many of them, people started calling me by those names. So I think it has just happened organically. It wasn't very intentional because I am curious. And then, I think all of us feel good if we, let's say, connect to people and they make something out of it. You think you were instrumental in creating some value. I think all of us feel probably satisfied by creating value in one form or the other. So I do think that creating connections where both people benefit from each other, or even if one person benefits from the other, is some form of value creation. And I think it's human nature to feel good when you create some value of any sort. So for me, this is what I think has led me to continue to do more of that. And I think after a while, it has become a self-fulfilling prophecy because now everyone is sent off to me. So if someone meets someone and has a question, say, I don't know, but I know someone who has. So I get all kinds of connections, which is good because I get even more diverse connections, which I've had before because people have figured out that I enjoy doing it, and a lot of people, for some reason, don't. So they, palm it off to me, and I'm quite happy to get any number of people from anywhere, and it's a win-win for me and for them as well. And many people tell me that I didn't need to know anyone else; I just know you. If I need something, I'll call you. That's fine. So I think everyone has to figure out the reason or the need for them to do networking. Many a time in professional setting, networking is seen as a tactical activity to get some benefit from the other person. We all know that, some of those things will not go too far. Let's say, I go to you seeking some help once or twice. Maybe you'll help out, but If I keep going to you all the time with some need and I have nothing to give in return, beyond a
Offered,
point you
yeah.
might feel bored and so on. So I think the again the framework of networking that I have learned, again reflecting on the past, and I guess it can be validated by anyone who has some network, is to say, if in your interaction or conversation or in that relationship, you do three things consistently, then I think those networks and those relationships will prevail, which is number one, you share with them something that is useful to them, some information, some need or whatever. Two, you seek some information that is useful to you. So you've created a symbiotic relationship. And thirdly, you offer to help. And this framework also came to me in one town hall in Dell. A guy called Manish Mehta answered this thing, just do these three things. And if you do it repeatedly, all those networks will stay. Everyone wants to meet someone who can share something with them,
Yeah.
whom they can share something with, and they're always helpful. Why? So if you look at all your friends, maybe all those friendships you can describe using this framework. So can you intentionally do this over a period of time with many other people? And if you can do that, they can be your friends as well.
Now, just like anything that we maintain in life, friendships and relationships require investment of time, energy. Now, when you scale to such numbers, how do you maintain the contact? How do you invest in these relationships to ensure that you know what's happening with others' lives? I mean, if you don't know what's happening, then how are you going to help them or how are you going to ask for help? So, how do you maintain this contact? Is there any formula again for this?
Yeah. So I think there are two things there that I was telling you about, that JOMO mode, that I
Yep,
don't spend
yep,
time on many other things. So the
yep.
only time I spend is on these aspects. So that's one. So I have more time than many others. So I can go beyond the number, I guess. So that's
Yep,
the
yep.
first explanation. The second one related to their lives. Actually, I don't maintain relationships as well as people would like to believe. And the reason is that for me, the purpose is supreme. The people are a means to an end. So the fact that I'm talking to you, it's not really Murli, but what Murli represents at this point in time, which is what I'm after. So I mean, people sometimes feel bad that they are not important, but I say you are important, but you are a means to a larger end. And therefore, you are also a input factor in the larger purpose that I believe in, which is to sort of, I don't know
I think
how
we
to
need to put a
describe it.
disclaimer here that people shouldn't try this on their spouses, the same thing.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is that, end of the day, if both of us today are able to
Yes.
create this podcast that can create value for others, so
Yeah.
you and I are tied to that purpose more than tied to each other. So I always say that this bond of relationship is much smaller than the bond of what we are all together creating. So as there's someone also said that, if people stop worrying about who get the credit, a lot more can get done. So I really relate to that idea that if we are all not worried about did you call me or not call me or why are you
Yes.
calling me after
Yes.
6 months, but saying that
Yeah.
whenever we last met, did we not create so much value? So why do you
Yes.
worry about what happened in between? Maybe there was no need for us to come together to create value. So I'm not a big believer in sort of chit chat or let's call someone monthly. In fact, I'm actually the other extreme. I have publicly said that I do not remember birthdays, anniversary, or anything. And even if I remember, I'll forget to say, because to me, it's a waste of time. And a lot of people now understand it. So, like, my JOMO mode is so extreme that some people who don't know me may feel that I'm an extremist. But in my mind, I'm just keeping my CPU and my storage really free for things that I truly value versus things. In fact, I forget names and I will tell people that, I've forgotten your name, but I remember we did a podcast together. So, do you worry about the name on the podcast?
Now, in fact, one of the things which has been highlighted in the last nearly an hour is that use technology, use whatever is there to make yourself more human. That is what is coming across to me. Connecting with people, knowing who you are, enjoying what you actually do rather than falling into the line and wanting to do something what others are doing. Now, is there anything that you're concerned about going forward when it comes to technology? Some,
We should only be concerned about human intent. Everything else is just just around there. So we could have been concerned about guns or knives or nuclear technology or any other technology. So I think it's the humans that you should be, or their intent is what we should be concerned about. And back, I also said that I worry about the intent and the character and other values that people carry. So I'm more concerned about the softer aspects, not really about technology, because technology actually can always be a force for good. every technology known to us can be a massive force for good, and it is, but it is also a massive force for bad, and it is. So I think it's up to us and our intentionality, which we have to worry about. Technology is dumb, data is dumb. People say that, oh, data is talking. I said, data is not talking, you are talking.
Very true. In fact, I hope this podcast kind of sends out that right message and also, help people kind of decide what is best for them. Now, the last bit of the conversation, I would like to, ask you quick questions. I wouldn't call it the rapid fire round or the lightning round, but these are questions which actually will highlight certain aspects of your life, which might be helpful for all the listeners and viewers. Your go-to book recommendations. Now, if you can give us, say, a few book recommendations, I'm sure people would love to hear that. And something that has changed you, like the Quake books, as they call it, right? Books that have changed you.
Yeah. So I enjoy books that change the way I think about that topic totally. So one of them, which a lot of people have read, is the book called Sapiens, which changed
Yes.
my worldview about how to think about humanity and so on and so forth. The other book is a book called The Invisible Women. It will change everyone's view about how they think about gender, because I think we think about gender in a very superficial way, but how, the whole society, layer by layer, over so many thousands of years, has created a bit of a, inequality unintentionally. And if we understand it at an L1, L2, L3, L4, L5 level, we will be able to deal with it much better than the superficial way in which we are dealing it. So I think the
What
women book.
what is L1, L2? Just to kind of
Oh, so it's
understand.
again the engineering way to say you can break up a topic into lower levels. So, at a higher level, there is, think of the species, there's a species at the top, then there's something at the bottom, and then you go.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
a process diagram where you have the higher level description, then you go down to the next level, and then the next level. So, something like
Okay.
that. So, I think if you break down our society into its constituents and its constituents and its constituent and look deeper, there are so many things which are there. I'll just give you an example. So the transport system in a city
Yeah.
is, if you were to design one, you will design based on predictable traffic flows. The
Yeah.
predictable traffic flows when cities were built were factory workers going to factories, not
Mhm.
women going about doing their day job, because no one knew what they will do when. So
Yeah.
if a woman has to go out with the baby to go shopping, there is no bus. The bus
Mhm.
timings are aligned to predictability of the man going to the office. So a lot of our society, the work given to men were far more simple and predictable, and therefore a lot of things in our society is designed for men, not
Right.
not not by design, but because they were more predictable, whether it was the way the
The
house was built.
industrialization, which led to the entire concept
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
productivity and yeah.
yeah. So this book actually highlights a lot of those deeper aspects to say. I mean, they said that if you design a large field, boys will play, but if you had smaller fields, then the girls will play, because girls like small places, boys like large places. So sometimes large places will deter the girls from playing outside. So the book gives so many examples of real experiments that they have done in Sweden and other places and things like that for you to say, oh, wow, I never even thought of it. So it's like the sapient moment on the gender diversity piece. The third book is a book called Donut Economics, again written by a woman. And the donut really is the donut that we eat. It has two circles. So the inner circle represents the minimum that every human being on earth should have. Outer circle represents the capacity of the earth to provide for us. So if we go below the inner circle, then someone is going, in the wrong direction,
But
and the
yeah,
outer circle,
yeah.
then we are destroying the environment. So that lady has described in much greater detail on how do you think about creating a society which can operate between those upper and lower control limits and not disturbing, at the same time being equitable. Now we all know that this is a big issue of sustainability today at every level.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
book again gives some very interesting ideas and some thoughts which were not obvious at that point in time. Another book is called The Blind Watchmaker. This is by a guy called Richard Dawkins, an evolutionary biologist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the blind watchmaker, basically, he's all about, not believing in creation and so on and
God,
so
and
forth.
he doesn't believe in, yeah. So he's
Mm.
written a few books
So,
regarding the same. Yeah.
yeah, so this book is very interesting to say. If you find a watch on a hill, they say, oh, this must be designed by someone. But he says nature is like an exquisite watch, but it has been not made by God, but by nature. So nature is the blind watchmaker. So he said this is all, happened through nature. So it's a very interesting way in which, he has done. There's one other book on history, and I'm forgetting the name. But the main idea over there is that we have been told a history which is very linear and very nice. This happened, that happened, that happened. He said, frankly, it gives many examples to say, frankly, this far more complex. History was not as nice. I mean, someone has fitted a pattern, it sounds nice, but here are so many counterexamples to say that so many other things were happening. So it's almost like saying there were lots of scatter and you fit a curve on it and it looks like. So his saying is that you can think about history also in many different ways. There are many other things that have inspired me. There's something called the starfish and the spider.
Yeah.
If you cut the starfish, it grows back. So he's saying, how do you create organization like a starfish and not a spider? So starfish is like Wikipedia, a large organization, or it's like anonymous. It just
Decentralized.
decentralized.
Yeah.
But a spider is like a centralized organization. So he again talks about how do you create movements of people coming together, the open source movement or the alcoholic movement or many others, and how do you create that and without any incentive, people coming for a cause. So again, some very interesting insight there. There's a very nice 12-hour, 24 half an hour lectures by Professor Michael Sandel on justice and philosophy, and he talks about how our understanding of morality and philosophy have evolved over the last 200-300 years. So I think these are the kind of thing, whether it is philosophy or organization design or sustainability or history or this thing, anything which is, disrupting the way we have thought about something is interesting to me because it tells me that, oh, this is not the only way to think about it. There are other ways to think about it. So that's
You improve your mental models through that.
Yeah.
Any podcasts, anything that you listen to regularly? Anybody? Because that's again something which makes us learn so much.
Yeah. So again, there is nothing standard there. They're all forwards or something. So at one point in time, I was listening to Lallan Top Show by Saurabh Srivastava. It's a Hindi podcast, but he brought about, Javed Akhtar's brother Salman Akhtar. I didn't even know he existed. It was a lovely podcast of what he spoke about. I have, had Tim Ferriss. There's another famous
Yeah, Tim
podcaster.
Ferriss is quite famous, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard Mukesh Bansal, Nikhil Kamath. So there are so many podcasts and new ones coming by the day. So I think friends of mine will sometimes forward something to me and say, okay, this is cool. Why don't I look at it? So it could be on science and technology, philosophy. In the recent past, I've heard Swami Sarpriyananda, who's a guru in the Ramakrishna Mission.
Yes,
I've
New York.
heard
He's
Osho.
based in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, I have also Osho, who I have found to be quite fascinating, although I'd heard about him, but never heard him. So yeah, so I just access information from wherever. Once in a while, I'll get, let's say, interested in philosophy. So one time I was listening to Jiddu Krishnamurti and Ayn Rand and any other philosopher. One time I got interested in something else. So I think there's no method to the madness. I have lots of different newsletters which come on politics or economic policy or finance, whatever. So I think I create optionality to read and listen to a lot of things, but then I have limited time, so I will not end up listening to all. But I do create a long list curated from all the WhatsApp groups or friends who forward it to me. So whenever I'm alone, running or in flight or somewhere else, I'll just look at that and listen to it. But I don't have a bucket list like many others. I said, there's too much knowledge out there. So let me always have the optionality to read or listen, but it doesn't mean that I have to listen to it all.
Yeah, I've been doing more or less what you've been telling, but one problem that I face is how do you tie these concepts together? I know this
Yeah.
is meant to be a rapid fire round, but it is actually going into a little deep dive. But how do you
Yeah.
tie the concept?
Yeah. So my own view is that these patterns or these concepts, in my mind at least, emerge over time. And many a time they emerge when you are asked a question. So many a time some of the answer that I gave you were actually tying those concepts together on my own. It wasn't by design. So I think our concepts come together in response to something. So for example, when you are under threat, all your other senses will come together to save you. So I do think that sometimes they come just organically by running, but many a time they come because I'm trying to think of a solution to a problem or someone is asking me a question. I said, oh, what I just said, I have never said before. And I can see that where I was coming from because these 3-4 things that I captured is what is there. So I don't force myself to summarize at the end of a talk or a podcast to say, what did I learn? Because I think we don't need to do that. I think as long as we are absorbing, there will come a time when they will come together automatically and we don't necessarily need to force it is the way I have thought about it.
Wonderful. Now, is there any one personal habit that you have developed that has had the biggest impact on your life, professional, personal?
Yeah. So I think, what I have done is inadvertently again, but now I tell people that they could do it. I tell folks that, we are all born as a variable in someone else's equation. And I use these terminologies because I am in this field where people like these terminologies. So I said, you are a variable in someone else's equation. And as you grow older,
So
you
so
become a
it's so it's like you're the the you're not the main star in the movie for
yeah,
somebody else. You're a supporting actress.
yeah, that's a good one. So you are a supporting actress in so many movies. So you become bigger, and in some other movie they add you, in an organization, in something else, right? And that is great. Nothing wrong. I think we are part of a society, social animal. We have to become part of as many movies. That's part of life. But I think we ought to determine which is our movie, right? So I think it is our duty to determine what our movie is, and also to let everyone know what movie we are playing. And that is the one which will put constraints. So I'll give you an example. I am someone who people enjoy that, oh, you are a fitness fit guy, you sleep at the right time, all of that. Now, when we have spoken about that, then it's very hard for them to say, let's go party at midnight and let's have a drink.
Right.
Unlike, right?
Yeah.
But they could say that if they didn't know this about me. Similarly, a lot of people feel, oh, you are such a nice leader. You delegate and you allow and empower your people. And then many of people will say, okay, I have my son looking for internship. Can I send you the CV? And I'll say, yeah, sure. I have so and so in my team who's the process owner. It's very hard for them to then say, hey, you know what? Can you tell that person to violate that process for my son? Very difficult for them to
Right.
say that. So what I'm saying is that I have defined my movie, which is the superset of all the other movies, then becomes so much more easier that I don't think I'm disturbing anyone. I'm just imposing some constraints which they've already accepted because I've told them. And then life becomes easier. So I think many a time people say you have to say no and you have to say no and all that. I said, if you have defined your movie very well to every character, you actually never have to say no, because in all of these cases, they will not ask because they have understood that this is not who you are. So that is one thing that I would say, that if everyone can define their movie or their optimization equation and communicate it very well to all the constituents around them, hopefully they will have a much better life. They will not have distress and problems and need to say no and so forth.
It's like setting rules. Now, whatever you said about movie is you have set your own rules and you're sticking to it 100% of the time. And people around you know that you're going to stick to it 100% of the time. And therefore, they wouldn't violate that rule when it comes to, offering you, as you said, a meal or a drink or asking you to come out for a late night party. So wonderful. I think that's a wonderful habit that people can actually.
I think, the rules is the what. I think what people relate to is the why. So if I can back up those rules with the why, so let's say fitness, leadership by delegation. So if people relate to those things, they say, yeah, so I understand where you're coming from. Now, how can I quarrel with your rule? Otherwise, it's very easy
Right.
to say, let's break rules.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
let's break a why. That's hard. No one
That's
likes
very
to
difficult.
break a principle, because principle is cardinal. Rules are ephemeral. So I do think that we should, let people understand the why, not so much the rule. I think the rule will be derived from that principle.
Now, coming back to, your team, when you're not in the room, what do people talk about you as?
First of all, I would not know because I'm not in the room. But they could talk any number of things. They could say all the good things that you said. But I think many of them could say things that may not sound as good. Some of them may say that he delegates too much. He's not decisive enough and take up call. And yeah, he just let it be. Now it may appear that I'm letting it be, but the time frame that I have in mind is slightly longer than some of the other people in the room. And I do try to explain that, you are thinking of this particular task where I delegated and it took longer, but I was trying to create a culture and a process, and I was looking at a longer term process to drive that process. Some others may also say that I don't scold anyone. Some people say, you need to scold that fellow. That fellow is totally bad. Now, I have my own ways of, doing things. I mean, I don't believe in public shouting and scolding. I have my own ways of letting people know the message privately if it is a difficult message and so forth. So I do think that there are parts of my style that some people may not enjoy. People like some people who like very, very decisive, top-down type of leadership, which is also required in many instances. I don't think I am that. So I think I am someone who's more long-term and more nudging type. And maybe my style may not be relevant in certain environments. Maybe I have been in enabling function roles where some of these style elements may be an advantage. I suspect that if maybe I'm in a sales or an operation or a delivery role where you have to take quick decisions and do a lot of things at a very frequent basis, maybe my style may not work. I don't know. I have not put myself in those situations. So like I said, that I think I have a certain style which may work in some situations with some people, but I'm sure there'll be situations and people who may not enjoy it also.
Mr. Pankaj, it's been wonderful actually. As we come to the end of this, I would say really enlightening conversation, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you, not only from my side, from our team of Luminary Lounge and also the listeners and viewers for sharing such wonderful insights and your experiences with us. Now, your journey from Gorakhpur to IIT to IIM and now heading one of the biggest groups in India is truly inspiring. And of course, the perspectives of being a human in the world when technology is actually what is dictating, talking about abundance. You said not to summarize, but I'm quite tempted to summarize whatever you told. So I'm sure a lot of insights have been kind of gained here. Before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom or any wonderful quotes that you like to share with our listeners and viewers?
See, I think one thing which I keep sharing with everyone, that sometime when you listen to folks like me who have gray hair, and if folks like Murli praise them a lot, you will feel that whatever they have said must be true and must be pearls of wisdom. So the only thing I tell everyone is that use your own judgment to form your own model. Whatever I have shared with you was based on my own experiences, to take it as an input. So I always say that, there was a movie called Aankhon Dekhi where Paresh Rawal would say that if I haven't seen it, I don't know it. Something like that. So I believe that you have to, weigh everything based on your own personal experiences. Today, there are so many people preaching a lot of things, whether they are gurus or leaders or whoever, and there's nothing wrong in them preaching something. But I think everyone has to believe that that preaching has been derived based on their own experiences. And therefore, everything has to be taken as an input and not as gospel truth or a certain specific direction. I think if everyone remember that, and it's very hard because some very, very senior or seasoned or well-known people make claims, and you are, likely to believe that I should just follow it and there can't be anything better than that. I think resist from that, form your own mental model, form your own equation, take your time, test it out. Don't follow anyone blindly. I mean, this seems very, very simple, but I think many a time, especially young people can, fall for it and believe that some senior person has said it or parents have said it must be right. And I would also tell the seniors or the parents or anyone else to say, don't give wisdom as if that is the only way to do it. Allow them to process it and allow them to think for themselves. Because many times, again, inadvertently, we may say that, oh, it happened for me or I have seen it and therefore you should do it. I think both parties have to become cautious to say that each individual will have their own life and their own experiences. Let them determine their equation based on that. Let someone else not impose it because they think that is best for the other.
Wow, wonderful. Now, your insights definitely, remind us that the world which is driven by now data, technology, it's not about just that. It's about human stories. It's about connections that truly matter and being a human. So thank you once again for joining us on this. I mean to say it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And to all our listeners, I would like to say thanks for tuning in. It's not easy to spend an hour and 25 minutes with us. So sharing your time, thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, do please subscribe. Leave a review to let us know what we did right and what we can improve on, and whom would you like to listen to on our podcast. And please share it with your network, with your friends, if it's going to add value to them. And join us next month, when we bring in more inspiring stories, insights from lives well lived. Until then, keep shining and stay curious.